The day Eleanor Winters stepped through the dusty doorway of Pearson's pharmacy with a $400 cashier's check and a suitcase full of medical textbooks, every healthcare professional in Millfield Grove whispered behind their pristine white coats. In this tight-knit rural community, where pharmaceutical knowledge passed from mentor to apprentice over decades, and trust was built through generations of caring for the same families, this former high school biology teacher with her online pharmacy technician certification clearly didn't grasp the unforgiving nature of the business she was purchasing. What these lifelong pill counters couldn't possibly know was that their gravest error wasn't doubting her pharmaceutical abilities, it would be underestimating what she was about to discover beneath their very noses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The weathered brick buildings of Millfield Grove's Main Street stood like faithful sentinels along the tree-lined avenue, their faded signage and worn awnings telling stories of more prosperous times. Once a thriving agricultural center, the small Midwestern town had struggled since the closure of the regional military research facility 15 years ago, leaving behind a community of skilled workers with dwindling opportunities. Among the businesses still barely surviving was a cluster of healthcare establishments. Their waiting rooms echoed with muted conversations and flipping magazine pages from dawn until dusk. The monthly meeting of the Millfield Grove Business Association was in full swing at Caroline's Country Kitchen. Coffee mugs clinked against worn Formica tables while plates of Caroline's famous apple crumble made rounds among the gathered business owners. Pharmacists in their professional attire sat alongside doctors in casual clothes, all discussing the same concerns they'd been facing for years: decreasing population, increasing costs, and the looming shadow of the MedMax pharmacy chain threatening to siphon away what little business remained. Dr. Samuel Chun, whose family had operated Chun Family Medical Practice for 3 generations, held court in the corner booth. At 62, his compassionate eyes and steady hands spoke of a lifetime spent caring for the people of Millfield Grove. The Chen name was synonymous with trustworthy healthcare in the community, their blue and white sign a fixture on Main Street since 1957. Pearson finally threw in the towel on that pharmacy of his, Samuel remarked to the small group gathered around his booth. Closed the doors last week after struggling for 4 years? About time, nodded Margaret Williams, who ran the local medical supply store that her grandmother had opened after returning from serving as a nurse in Korea. Her family had been providing healthcare equipment to Millfield Grove residents for over 60 years. That building's been falling apart since the flooding in the 19 storm. Pearson never recovered after his stroke. Poor man. Who would want that money pit? Asked James Donovan, whose ambulance service had been responding to emergency calls from the rural highways since the 1980s. Place needs a complete overhaul. New dispensing systems, new inventory management, new roof. You're looking at 6 figures minimum before you could fill a single prescription. Before Samuel could respond, Dr. Lisa Patel, who owned the newly opened holistic wellness center on the edge of town, joined the conversation. Someone already bought it, she said, lowering her voice slightly. Came in yesterday asking about patient referrals and local healthcare networks. Some widow who's never run a pharmacy before. A ripple of disbelief spread through the group. Pearson's pharmacy had been floundering for years, its outdated equipment and deteriorating building making it increasingly difficult to compete with online pharmacies and chain stores. The county inspector had cited the property 3 times in the past year alone for various violations, and rumors about mold in the back storeroom had further diminished its already questionable value. A widow? Samuel's wife Amelia raised an eyebrow as she slid into the booth beside him. Amelia handled the books for Chun Family Medical Practice and knew better than most how thin the margins had become in small-town healthcare. What's she planning to do with it? Community pharmacy, apparently, Lisa replied, stirring her tea. Said something about personalized medication management and health education programs. Had some online certification from a virtual pharmacy technician. Program. Kept talking about healthcare accessibility and patient empowerment. James Donovan gave a derisive snort. Healthcare accessibility? You mean undercutting prices to steal customers and then marking up medications like those chain places? That's if she can even get the place operational. Pearson's equipment was ancient, Margaret added. That compounding area hasn't been updated in years, and the inventory system was practically prehistoric. Did you see what she paid for it? Asked Amelia, always practical about financial matters. Pearson was asking $25,000 last I heard, which was already a steal considering the real estate alone. $400, Lisa said, her expression clearly communicating her disbelief. Pearson practically gave it away. His children just wanted to be free of his debts and move on. $400? Samuel repeated, nearly choking on his coffee. The pharmaceutical reference materials alone are worth more than that, even if they are outdated. She's got a teenage daughter with her too, Lisa continued. Quiet girl who seemed to be constantly taking notes on her tablet. No husband in sight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Samuel shook his head. That place needs at least $120,000 in equipment investment just to meet basic dispensing requirements. The inventory management system alone would cost $15,000, not to mention the licensing fees, insurance, building up inventory with distributors who want payment up front from a new business owner with no track record. I give her till the first inspection, Amelia declared with the confidence of someone who had seen many businesses come and go over the years. Remember that guy from Indianapolis who tried to open that specialty compounding pharmacy back in 18? Lasted 5 weeks before the Board of Pharmacy Violations shut him down. The conversation might have continued in this vein had the diner's bell not chimed, signaling a new arrival. The door swung open, admitting a gust of fresh spring air, and the last person any of them expected to see at a gathering of established Millfield Grove business owners. Eleanor Winters stood in the doorway, scanning the room with determined gray eyes. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had endured profound loss, but refused to be defined by it. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and while her clothes were clearly new, conservative navy dress with a white cardigan and sensible flats that hadn't yet acquired the scuffs of daily wear, there was nothing pretentious about her appearance. Beside her stood a teenager around 16, with her mother's heart-shaped face and determined chin, but with copper-colored hair that made her stand out in the conservative town. The girl clutched a tablet computer, her expression hovering between supportive and mortified at being dragged to this gathering of adults. The pair paused momentarily, taking in the room full of strangers who had suddenly gone quiet at their entrance. Samuel and Amelia exchanged glances. Margaret Williams cleared her throat. Lisa Patel studied her teacup with sudden interest. Eleanor took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked directly toward the group of business owners who had just been discussing her imminent failure. The teenager followed reluctantly, a half-step behind. "Good evening," Eleanor said. As she approached, her voice carrying a hint of a southern accent, but projecting the confidence that belied her newcomer status. "I'm Eleanor Winters, the new owner of what used to be Pearson's Pharmacy." She extended her hand to Samuel, who seemed to be the center of the group. "And you are?" Samuel hesitated only briefly before shaking her hand. His physician's palm, accustomed to reassuring nervous patients, engulfed her smaller one, but her grip was firm and steady. "Samuel Chun, my practice is about a quarter mile west of your pharmacy on Main Street." Chun Family Medical Practice. Eleanor nodded. The family physicians. I saw your clinic yesterday. Impressive patient reviews online. Something flickered in Samuel's expression, perhaps surprised that she had already been researching neighboring businesses, or that she correctly identified his specialty. This is my wife, Amelia, he said, gesturing to the woman beside him. She manages our practice. Pleasure to meet you, Amelia said, her tone professional but cool. Her eyes traveled to the teenager standing slightly behind Eleanor. And this is my daughter, Eleanor said, resting her hand lightly on the girl's shoulder. She's my assistant manager for the digital side of things. Olivia, these are the Chuns. They run one of the established medical practices in town. Olivia stepped forward with surprising poise despite her obvious discomfort. Nice to meet you, Dr. and Mrs. Chun. Do you use Epicare or Athena for your electronic health records? Mom's trying to decide which system to implement for medication synchronization. Tracking. The unexpected technical question from a copper-haired teenager momentarily silenced the group. It was Margaret Williams who recovered first, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Young lady, running a pharmacy involves a lot more than picking software, she said. That Pearson place hasn't passed inspection in years. Your mother's bought herself quite the project. Rather than appearing embarrassed, Olivia tapped something on her tablet. We know the building failed the last safety inspection due to ventilation issues in the compounding area and insufficient security for controlled substances. But the structural engineer we consulted said the foundation and main building are sound. She looked up from her device. Most of the issues are cosmetic or involve outdated systems that we're planning to upgrade anyway. Margaret's mouth opened and closed without producing words. Lisa Patel leaned forward with increased interest. I'm Lisa Patel, she said, extending her hand to Eleanor. Patel Wellness Center on the East End, opened 3 years ago. Of course, Eleanor nodded. You've got the Integrated Nutrition Counseling Program. Smart addition with the rise in metabolic disorders. You know something about preventative health? Lisa asked, her eyebrows rising slightly. I know something about educational trends, Eleanor replied. I spent the last 15 years teaching high school biology and health sciences. The preventative approach is following a similar adoption curve to what we saw with STEM education. Early resistance, followed by rapid mainstream acceptance once the outcomes data catches up. Something in her tone, the precise technical assessment without pretension, seemed to catch Lisa off guard. Been in healthcare for 12 years, she said, a hint of pride breaking through her initial skepticism. Started with conventional medicine. Made the transition to integrative approaches when I saw how lifestyle factors were driving most chronic conditions. That kind of adaptability is crucial now, Eleanor agreed. I hope you won't mind if I ask for advice occasionally. The wellness space is evolving quickly, and I want to make sure we're equipped to provide accurate information to our customers. Before Lisa could respond, James Donovan interjected. We heard you paid $400 for the whole operation. Quite a bargain for someone with no experience in the business. The question was pointed, almost challenging, but Eleanor didn't flinch. Mr. Pearson's children were more interested in resolving the situation quickly than maximizing profit, she replied. And yes, the price reflected the condition of the property and the outstanding violations that need to be addressed. That's a far cry from being ready to actually dispense medications, Samuel observed, though his tone had lost some of its earlier dismissiveness. You're absolutely right, Eleanor acknowledged with a frankness that seemed to surprise them. Which is why I've spent the last 10 months taking certification courses and working under licensed pharmacist Drew Hamilton in Louisville. I'm not claiming to have the decades of experience everyone in this room has, but I'm not coming into this completely blind. May I ask why? Amelia inquired, genuine curiosity breaking through her reserve. Why leave whatever career you had to take on a failing pharmacy in a town where you don't know anyone? Eleanor glanced at her daughter before answering. When Millfield High School was consolidated with the county system last year, my teaching position was eliminated. At first, it seemed like a disaster, but then I started thinking about what I really wanted for myself and Olivia. She looked around at the community of business owners who had gathered for generations. My husband was a military pharmacist before he passed away 5 years ago. I spent many evenings helping him study during his training, learning the basics, alongside grading papers. When he died during an overseas deployment, his dream of opening a community pharmacy died too. I always regretted not having the credentials or confidence to honor that dream. There was a sincerity in her words that was difficult to dismiss, a genuine connection to the work that transcended business calculations. Olivia and I have been moving with military reassignments her whole life. I wanted her to have roots somewhere, to understand what it means to build something real and be part of a community. When I saw the listing for Pearson's pharmacy at that price, it felt like a second chance. Noble sentiments, James said, his voice still skeptical. But pharmacy operations aren't a hobby or a legacy project for most of us. It's our livelihood, and it's harder than most outsiders can imagine. The regulations alone on controlled substances require constant updating and compliance. I don't doubt that for a moment, Eleanor replied, meeting his gaze directly. And Twanthu, I'm not approaching this as a hobby. I've invested everything I have into making this work. I've developed a 3-year business plan focusing on medication therapy management, patient education, and gradual equipment upgrades that should make the operation financially viable. She reached into her shoulder bag and pulled out a folder. In fact, that's partly why I came tonight. I was hoping to introduce myself to the healthcare community and also to find out if anyone might be willing to share insights about the specific health needs in Millfield Grove. The demographic data suggests a high prevalence of chronic conditions, but statistics don't tell the whole story. Samuel and Margaret exchanged glances. Community health insights weren't uncommon among healthcare providers with established relationships, but usually only between those with proven reliability and family connections. What exactly are you planning to focus on? Samuel asked, his tone more businesslike now. We're starting with medication therapy management, health education programs, and basic dispensing services, Eleanor explained. Areas where the barrier to entry is lower. While I continue to expand my certifications, I'm partnering with a licensed pharmacist from the next county for supervision until I'm fully qualified both in credentials and experience. Her answer revealed more thought and planning than any of them had expected. Even James seemed slightly less dismissive. Olivia, who had been quiet during most of the exchange, added, "We're also setting up a digital medication reminder system so people can manage complex medication schedules more easily. Most pharmacies in a 50-mile radius don't offer that level of patient support." "Well, Ms. Winters," Samuel said after a thoughtful pause, "I've got some patient education materials on common chronic conditions that we don't use anymore since switching to our new system. You're welcome to have them for your health education programs." It wasn't an effusive welcome, but it was a practical gesture of the kind healthcare providers understood, a willingness to help a newcomer, even one they weren't convinced would succeed. "Thank you, Dr. Chun," Eleanor said, recognizing the significance of the offer. "I appreciate that more than I can say." "Call me Samuel," he replied with a nod. "Everyone does." Amelia, watching the exchange, seemed to come to a decision. "Have you folks eaten yet? Carolyn makes a wonderful apple crumble, and you should meet the rest of the business community if you're going to be staying." The qualification, "if you're going to be staying," revealed that Amelia, like the others, still had her doubts. But the invitation itself was a small opening, a crack in the wall of skepticism. "We'd like that," Eleanor said with a genuine smile. "Wouldn't we, Olivia?" Olivia nodded, though her enthusiasm seemed tempered by teenage restraint. The prospect of food and potentially finding allies in this new town clearly appealed to her despite her earlier reluctance. As Amelia led them toward an empty table, the group of business owners watched with mixed expressions. None of them believed that Eleanor Winters would still be in business when the Harvest Festival arrived. Her plan sounded good in theory, but they had all seen the harsh realities of healthcare destroy better prepared operations than hers. Yet something about her direct manner and evident preparation left them feeling slightly less certain of her failure than they had been before meeting her. She was clearly no dilettante playing at being a pharmacist. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. $500 says she's gone by Thanksgiving, James Donovan murmured to Lisa as they watched Eleanor introduce herself to the hardware store owner. Lisa considered this, watching as Eleanor listened intently to Caroline describing her arthritis, her notepad now in her hand rather than her daughter's. "I don't know," Lisa said slowly. "There's something about her. I'm not saying she'll make it, mind you, but I'm not betting against her either." Samuel, overhearing them, said nothing, but he made a mental note to check his office for other educational materials that might be useful for a pharmacy getting started on a shoestring budget. Just in case. 2 weeks after the business association meeting, Eleanor stood in the center of her newly scrubbed pharmacy floor, squinting at the sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. The building around her was still a work in progress. Fresh paint on the customer waiting area, new LED lighting in the dispensing section. But the roof still leaked in the corner when it rained heavily, and the ancient security system made alarming beeps when it armed at night. Like everything else in the former Pearson's pharmacy, it required far more work than she had initially estimated. She consulted the building inspection report that had arrived yesterday, confirming what she had suspected. The ventilation system would need a complete overhaul before she could set up proper compounding services. The cost would be nearly $15,000 she hadn't budgeted for. Another setback in a growing list. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew Eleanor's attention. A well-maintained delivery van with Williams Medical Supply emblazoned on the door pulled into her freshly swept parking lot, Margaret Williams at the wheel. Eleanor took a deep breath before walking over to meet her. Though their initial encounter had been civil, Margaret represented the established business community that still viewed her with skepticism. "Morning, Ms. Winters," Margaret said as she climbed out of the van. Her tone was professionally polite, but carried an undercurrent of doubt that hadn't diminished since their first meeting. "Got your order of basic supplies and OTC inventory. Had to special order those compounding equipment pieces you wanted. Not much demand for personalized medication options around here." "I appreciate you going to the trouble," Eleanor replied, watching as Margaret lowered the van's rear doors to unload the boxes. Margaret gestured toward the building. "I see you've been busy. Got some of that safety work started?" "Just the preliminary upgrades in the customer area," Eleanor confirmed. "The main dispensing area improvements will have to wait until I've built up some operating capital." The inspector wasn't thrilled, but he agreed to a phased compliance plan. "Heard. You hired the tailor boy to help with the computers and inventory system." Eleanor nodded. "Noah's been wonderful. Computer science major home for the summer. He's setting up our digital prescription tracking system while he's here." "Noah's a good kid," Margaret agreed. "But running a pharmacy business is a lot more than fancy software and clean windows." She shook her head as she surveyed the property. Pearson ran this place with 2 experienced technicians and still couldn't make it work. Pearson was trying to run a traditional full-service pharmacy in a building that needed $150,000 in upgrades. Eleanor said carefully, "I'm taking a different approach." Margaret frowned. Pearson served patients in this town for 35 years. His father before him. They knew what they were doing. "I'm sure they did," Eleanor said evenly. But times have changed. Mail-order prescriptions, chain pharmacies, changing insurance reimbursements. The economics of pharmacy operations are different now. Maybe in your fancy business plans. Margaret replied, her voice hardening. But here in the real world, trying to run a pharmacy without the proper credentials and experienced staff is asking for trouble. First major dispensing error, first insurance audit, first controlled substance. Inspection, you'll be underwater fast. Eleanor had heard variations of this warning from nearly everyone she'd met in Millfield Grove. The persistent skepticism was wearing, but she kept her expression neutral. That's why we're starting with medication management and patient education, she explained, and why I've partnered with a licensed pharmacist for supervision. Before Margaret could respond, Olivia emerged from the office, tablet in hand and wireless earbuds in one ear. Mom, the website is live and I've set up the medication reminder app. Want to see the user interface? I'll be right there, honey. Eleanor called back. Margaret watched the exchange with a mixture of amusement and something harder to define. Your daughter seems to be taking to the business. Olivia's always been tech-savvy, Eleanor replied with a smile. She's already keeping better track of our digital outreach than I could. As if to prove her point, Olivia approached and handed Margaret a professionally designed business card. Our grand opening is next Saturday. We're offering free medication, reviews, and basic health screenings. The QR code links to our online appointment scheduling system. Margaret accepted the card with a bemused expression. Well, aren't you the little marketing director? Actually, I'm the digital health coordinator, Olivia replied matter-of-factly. I've been analyzing the local health demographics. You know that medication side effects is one of the most common health searches in this county? There's clearly demand for better medication education. Margaret glanced at Eleanor with newfound curiosity. You're teaching her a lot about business. She's teaching me too, Eleanor admitted. Olivia's digital skills have been invaluable. I couldn't have built our online presence without her. As if summoned by the conversation, Noah Taylor emerged from the back office, his face alight with excitement. Ms. Winters, the inventory database is complete, and the prescription tracking system is working with the tablets. We can now monitor medication interactions in real time from anywhere in the pharmacy. The pride in his voice brought a smile to Eleanor's face despite her fatigue and worries. Margaret looked from the enthusiastic college student to Olivia's confident expression, to Eleanor's determined stance. Something shifted in her demeanor, not approval exactly, but perhaps a grudging recognition that Eleanor's commitment went beyond what she had expected. Well, you better get a proper medication disposal system set up. Then, she said, reaching into her van and pulling out a small box. These were headed for recycling, but sounds like you might have use for them. She handed Noah a package of specialized pill counting trays and safety gloves. Noah accepted the gift with gratitude. Thanks, Ms. Williams. This is perfect for the dispensing station. Just don't expect those fancy computer systems to replace actual pharmaceutical knowledge. Margaret added, unable to resist one more skeptical comment. People around here know what good healthcare looks like. Actually, Eleanor interjected, we've already had inquiries from rural patients about medication management services. They're willing to drive from outlying farms because the nearest consultation services are over an hour away. Margaret's expression clouded. Country folks? That's your market, not town residents? Both, ideally, Eleanor explained. The rural customers help with sustainability, but I'm committed to providing accessible services for the entire community. That's why our pricing is tiered: premium services for complex cases, standard rates for basic needs. Don't hold your breath on winning over the locals, Margaret scoffed. They've been going to Samuel and the other established providers for generations. She climbed back into her van, her face set in skeptical lines. Good luck with your fancy software and country customers, Ms. Winters. You'll need it when winter Comies and the roads get bad. Eleanor watched her drive away, the dust from her tires settling on the freshly painted sign. Each day brought similar interactions, moments of connection undermined by deep skepticism, small kindnesses followed by dismissive predictions of her failure. "Don't worry, Mom," Olivia said, seeing the tension in Eleanor's shoulders. "Dr. Patel from the Wellness Center said the same thing last week, and then she ended up giving us access to her patient education library." Eleanor smiled at her perceptive daughter. "You're right. Actions speak louder than words around here. And our actions are going to build the best community pharmacy this town has ever seen. The only pharmacy this town has ever seen, Noah," declared with the absolute confidence only a 20-year-old could muster. Together, they walked back toward the office, but Eleanor paused as she caught sight of an unfamiliar car slowing as it passed their property. The driver, a middle-aged man in expensive suit, seemed to be taking pictures with his phone. "Who's that?" Olivia asked, following her mother's gaze. "I don't know," Eleanor replied, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. It was the third such car this week, people who were clearly not locals showing unusual interest in the former Pearson's pharmacy. Later that afternoon, as Eleanor struggled to organize the chaotic medication inventory system she'd inherited, she heard the crunch of tires on gravel again. Looking up, she recognized Samuel Chun's SUV with the medical practice logo on the door. Unlike Margaret, Samuel had been true to his word about sharing educational materials, though his help always came with plenty of advice and warnings. "Afternoon, Eleanor," he called as he climbed out of the vehicle. In the 2 weeks since the business meeting, they had progressed to first names, a small but significant sign of acceptance. "Saw your lights on late last night. Thought you might need a break." Amelia sent over some of her homemade granola bars. "Thanks, Samuel," Eleanor said gratefully, wiping sweat from her forehead. "That's really thoughtful." Something in her tone must have betrayed her tension, because Samuel's expression shifted to concern. "Everything all right? You seem on edge." Eleanor tensed. "What's wrong?" "Been hearing rumors at Caroline's kitchen," Samuel said, lowering his voice though there was no one else around. "Medmax Corporate has been asking questions about properties in the town center. Lisa Patel said a representative approached her last week about potential patient referral partnerships." "Medmax Corporate?" Eleanor repeated, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning she'd just repaired. "The pharmacy chain," Samuel nodded grimly. "They've been buying up independent pharmacies all along the interstate, consolidating them for their mail-order business. Word is they're looking to establish a distribution hub in this region. And they're interested in my property?" Eleanor asked, pieces falling into place. The mysterious cars, the strangers taking photos. "Can't say for certain," Samuel replied. "But that Pearson building has the best location in the district. Sits on the corner lot with parking on both sides. That's valuable to a corporate operation." Eleanor felt sick. She had invested everything she had financially and emotionally into this fresh start. "They can't force me to sell." "No," Samuel agreed. "But they can make it mighty uncomfortable to refuse. They've been known to buy surrounding properties and then create problems for holdouts restricting access, filing nuisance complaints, that sort of thing." He hesitated before adding, "Some folks around here might see selling to Medmax as a good thing. They pay above market value, and the development would bring different kinds of jobs. Not everyone shares your vision of keeping the town center as a community-focused area." The implication was clear. Eleanor might find herself even more isolated if corporate interests divided the community. "Thanks for the warning," she said, straightening her shoulders. "But I didn't come this far to give up at the first sign of pressure." Samuel studied her for a long moment before a slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Didn't figure you for a quitter." Just wanted you to know what you might be up against." As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, Amelia wanted me to ask if you and Olivia would like to come to dinner this weekend. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken. And whatever's fresh from the farmer's market. She wants to hear more about that medication reminder system you mentioned. Could be useful for our older patients." The invitation caught Eleanor by surprise. It was the first social overture any of the established healthcare families had extended. "We'd like that very much," she said, trying not to sound as touched as she felt. Samuel nodded. 6 o'clock Saturday then, and Eleanor, might want to bring that business plan of yours. I know some folks who might be interested in your approach to rural medication management. Could be there's something to your strategy, different. As it is." After he drove away, Eleanor stood in the middle of her fledgling pharmacy, the freshly organized shelves, the newly painted consultation room, the digital displays showing no appointments yet, and felt the full weight of the challenges. Ahead, equipment limitations, community skepticism, corporate pressure. But then she heard Olivia's laugh from the office as she worked with Noah on their website, and she remembered why she had taken this risk in the first place. Not just to build a sustainable business, but to give her daughter roots, purpose, and the satisfaction of creating something meaningful together. The sun was setting over Millfield Grove, casting long shadows across the town center that had been home to family businesses for generations. Eleanor was an outsider, a widow with determination and vision rather than a lifetime of local connections. But as she walked toward the office where her daughter waited, she felt a growing certainty that this place, challenging and unwelcoming as it sometimes seemed, was exactly where they belonged. What she didn't yet know was that the greatest test of that conviction was hidden directly beneath her feet, and it would upend not just her business plans, but potentially global public health security. The grand opening of Winters Family Pharmacy exceeded all of Eleanor's modest expectations. The free medication reviews brought in a steady stream of curious locals, many openly skeptical but unable to resist a complimentary service. Olivia's digital outreach had attracted rural residents with complex medication regimens, drawn by the promise of personalized guidance without the long drive to the city. By the end of the day, they had booked 12 consultations for the coming week and received cautiously positive feedback on their health education materials. "Not bad for day one," Samuel acknowledged when he stopped by late in the afternoon. "Though the real test comes when you start filling actual prescriptions." "I know," Eleanor agreed. "But at least people are willing to give us a chance." As promising as the public launch had been, it was what happened after hours that would change everything. Eleanor was in the back storeroom trying to organize the chaotic supply system she'd inherited when she noticed something odd about the floor near the wall. A section of the linoleum had a slightly different pattern, forming a rough square about 3 feet across. "That's strange," she muttered, kneeling to examine it more closely. The variation was subtle, only visible when the light hit it at a certain angle. She ran her hand across the surface, feeling a barely perceptible seam. Curiosity piqued, she grabbed a flashlight from her emergency kit and examined the edges more carefully. There was definitely a cut in the flooring, deliberately disguised but unmistakable to someone looking closely. One corner featured a small indentation that might once have been a handle point. "What are you doing back here, Mom?" Olivia asked, appearing in the doorway. "I thought we were getting pizza to celebrate." "Look at this," Eleanor said, waving her daughter over. "Does this floor section look different to you?" Olivia crouched beside her mother, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to interest. "It's like a trap door or something." "You think there's a storage cellar?" "Pearson never mentioned anything like that," Eleanor mused. Neither did the building inspector. They exchanged a look that mirrored each other's thoughts, a combination of caution and irresistible curiosity. Only one way to find out, Eleanor decided, retrieving a pry bar from the maintenance tools. It took nearly 15 minutes of Careful work to break the seal around the edges. Years of grime and possibly deliberate concealment had effectively hidden the access point. When they finally created enough leverage to lift the linoleum panel, it revealed a metal door with an old-fashioned combination lock. "Okay, this is officially weird," Olivia declared, capturing the discovery on her phone. "Who puts a locked door under a false floor in a pharmacy?" "Could be an old fallout shelter," Eleanor suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "This building dates back to the Cold War era." The combination lock presented another challenge, but Eleanor was reluctant to damage it. "Let me try something," she said, examining the mechanism. "Mr. Pearson's son gave me a notebook with all his father's business information, account numbers, supplier contacts. Maybe there's something about this." The notebook, a battered ledger, filled with Pearson's cramped handwriting, contained mostly mundane business records, but on the inside back cover, written in faded ink, was a series of numbers with no explanation. 381642. "Worth a try," Eleanor muttered, turning the dial carefully. To her surprise, the lock clicked open on the first attempt. "No way," Olivia breathed. "That's either incredibly lucky or seriously suspicious." Eleanor hesitated, suddenly aware that they might be crossing a line. "Maybe we should call someone before we go further." "Like who?" Olivia countered. "The police? Hello, officer. We found a secret door in our legally purchased building and thought you should know. They'll think we're crazy." After another moment's hesitation, Eleanor's curiosity won out. She pulled the door open, revealing a set of concrete steps descending into darkness. The beam of her flashlight illuminated what appeared to be a small chamber about 10 feet below. "I'm going down," she decided. "You stay here." "Absolutely not," Olivia protested. "This is exactly how horror movies start. Either we both go or neither of us goes." Eleanor recognized the stubborn set of her daughter's jaw, trait she'd inherited honestly, and nodded. "Fine, but I go first. And if anything seems dangerous, we're out of there immediately." The stairs were solid despite their age, and the chamber below was surprisingly clean and dry. As Eleanor's flashlight swept the space, both women gasped. It wasn't a fallout shelter. It was an underground room about 15 feet square. Its walls were lined with metal cabinets. A desk with what looked like laboratory equipment occupied one corner, while climate-controlled storage units covered another wall, their digital displays glowing faintly in the darkness. "Mom," Olivia whispered, her voice tight with uncertainty. "What is this place?" Eleanor shook her head, equally baffled. "I have no idea." They moved cautiously through the room. The cabinets were locked, but a set of keys hung on a hook near the desk. Opening the first cabinet revealed rows of labeled vials, each in protective casing with military-style identification codes. The second cabinet contained notebooks filled with chemical formulas and biological research data. "These look like pharmaceutical formulations," Eleanor said slowly, her biology teacher background helping her recognize the basic structures. "But nothing I've ever seen before." Olivia had moved to one of the climate-controlled units and was examining its digital readout. "This is set to exactly 4 degrees Celsius. Whatever's inside is being actively preserved." "Don't touch anything else," Eleanor warned, suddenly acutely aware that they were in over their heads. "We need to secure this place and call someone." "Call who?" Olivia asked again, but this time with genuine concern rather than teenage defiance. It was a good question. "Who did you call when you discovered what appeared to be a secret laboratory hidden beneath your newly purchased pharmacy?" The answer came unexpectedly the following morning. The temptation flickered briefly: financial security, an end to the struggle, resources to provide for Olivia's education without constant worry. But something in Chambers' too smooth manner and the timing of her interest reinforced Eleanor's suspicions. "I'm not interested in selling, Miss Chambers," she replied firmly. I've just opened my business and invested significantly in this location. Chambers' smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened slightly. I understand your hesitation. New ventures require emotional investment. But being practical, this location has significant challenges for a modern pharmacy. Outdated infrastructure, restricted space, limited technology integration potential. She gestured toward the sealed-off area. I understand you're already facing structural issues requiring extensive repairs. Our offer would alleviate those concerns entirely. The specific mention of the sealed area sent warning signals through Eleanor's mind. How did she know about that so quickly? Had she been watching the property even before Eleanor discovered the underground chamber? My business is doing well, and I'm addressing the building issue systematically, she replied, careful to reveal nothing. I appreciate your interest, but this property isn't for sale. Chambers' expression cooled further. Ms. Winters, corporate integration is inevitable in the pharmacy sector. The regulatory burdens and capital requirements are simply too high for independent operators in today's market. Early participants in our network receive premium compensation. Late joiners often find themselves disadvantaged. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Eleanor maintained her composed expression through years of practice, keeping calm while handling classroom emergencies. I'll take my chances with the market pressures, Miss Chambers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have medications to prepare before closing. After Chambers departed, Eleanor immediately contacted Harper, relaying the conversation in detail. The agent's response was measured but concerned. We'll investigate potential connections between Medmax and our situation. In the meantime, be careful. Corporate entities typically employ legal and financial pressure, not physical threats, but given the unusual circumstances. You think I might be in danger? Eleanor asked bluntly. I think caution is warranted, Harper replied. We're accelerating our timeline for clearing the facility. The team will work through the night if necessary. That evening, Eleanor and Olivia accepted Samuel and Amelia's dinner invitation, grateful for the distraction from the day's tensions. The Chun home was a comfortable ranch-style house filled with family photos and mementos from decades in the community. Amelia served a delicious meal of grilled chicken and fresh vegetables from their garden. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Samuel shared stories from his early days as a doctor, while Amelia revealed her background in public health before joining the family practice. Olivia and the Chun's college-age daughter Michelle discovered shared interests in healthcare, technology, and patient advocacy. You know, Amelia said as they enjoyed coffee after dinner, when you first showed up at that business meeting, I gave you a month tops. Amelia, Samuel chided, but his wife waved him off. It's true. We've seen plenty of newcomers with big ideas but no staying power. She smiled warmly at Eleanor. I'm glad to be proven wrong. The way you've handled the challenges you've faced, it's impressive. What challenges exactly? Eleanor asked carefully, wondering how much the community had noticed. Starting a business with limited capital, facing skepticism as an outsider, being a widow in a traditionally family-operated industry, Amelia listed. And now dealing with structural problems and corporate pressure, Samuel nodded. Chambers has been making rounds to all the property owners, offering above market value but making it clear that holdouts will face consequences. You've been approached too? Eleanor asked. Yesterday. Offered triple the assessed value for our practice. Samuel's expression darkened. When I declined, she mentioned potential changes to insurance networks that would make independent medical practices non-viable in rural areas. Amelia reached for her husband's hand. 3 generations of Chuns have cared for patients from that location. We're not giving it up for mail-order prescriptions and automated services. The solidarity warmed Eleanor unexpectedly. She wasn't alone in this fight, At least the parts of it she could share publicly. What if we organized the town businesses? She suggested. Presented a united front against the corporate takeover? Samuel considered this. Might work. Several owners are on the fence, but if enough of us stand firm, community pressure still matters in local politics. Amelia agreed, especially with the county health board elections coming up. As they discussed strategy, Eleanor felt a growing sense of connection to this place and these people. Despite the extraordinary secret beneath her pharmacy and the uncertainty it created, she was finding her place in Millfield Grove, not as an accepted outsider, but as an integrated member with a stake in the community's future. The sense of connection made what happened next all the more devastating. Dawn broke over Millfield Grove, painting the town center in soft golden light that belied the tension that had built overnight. Eleanor arrived at her pharmacy earlier than usual, sensing the accelerated urgency in Harper's team. The government agents had worked through the night, their unmarked vans still parked discreetly behind the building. Harper met her at the side entrance, her normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. Stubble shadowed Ramirez's jaw, and Harper's eyes carried the sharp focus of someone operating on minimal sleep. "We've got a situation," she said without preamble, guiding Eleanor to the small consultation room where Alvarez was coordinating the team's efforts. The facility wasn't just storing antidotes for historical pathogens. It was preserving countermeasures for something much more current. On a secure laptop, Alvarez brought up a series of chemical structures and biological markers that meant little to Eleanor despite her biology background. But the classified headers and urgency classifications were unmistakable. This station was maintained off books to store countermeasures against emerging engineered pathogens, Harper explained, including several that aren't supposed to exist outside of theoretical models. "Engineered pathogens?" Eleanor echoed. "You mean biological weapons?" "Not exactly." Alvarez handed her a tablet displaying research documentation. "These are more sophisticated than traditional bioweapons. Targeted synthetic viruses designed to affect specific genetic profiles or demographic groups while leaving others untouched. The data suggests someone has been creating designer pathogens with unprecedented specificity." Eleanor stared at the documents, the technical language overwhelming despite her science education. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with Medmax pressuring me to sell?" Harper pointed to a highlighted name on one of the documents, Global Cure Pharmaceuticals. "On paper, they're a research-focused pharmaceutical manufacturer. In reality, they're a front company that appears repeatedly in our intelligence about advanced pathogen development. And they're owned by Nexus Health Partners," Ramirez continued. "Which is Medmax's parent company," Eleanor finished, the connections clicking into place. Harper nodded grimly. "We believe Medmax's interest in Millfield Grove isn't just about distribution networks. It's about controlling access to this facility and the countermeasures it contains." "But why would a pharmacy chain want biological countermeasures?" Eleanor asked, struggling to make sense of the information. "Not for humanitarian purposes," Alvarez replied darkly. "Whoever controls the cure controls the response to an outbreak. It's about leverage, power, and potentially billions in emergency contracts if certain scenarios were to unfold." Eleanor realized with growing horror what they were suggesting. "You think they would actually use these pathogens? Create a crisis just to profit from the solution?" "We're not making that accusation officially," Harper said carefully. "But the pattern of strategic property acquisitions near former military research sites raises serious concerns. Pearson's shop, your shop, is particularly significant because it houses not just countermeasures, but the original research that led to their development." The implications crashed over Eleanor like a wave. "So when I refused to sell, you became a potential obstacle," Ramirez confirmed. "One they might decide to remove by means beyond corporate pressure." Fear tightened Eleanor's chest, not for herself, but for Olivia. "My daughter," is already being picked up by Agent Mitchell, Harper assured her. We're placing you both in protective custody until we can secure the evidence we need from the facility and coordinate with the FBI to move against Chambers and the Nexus Health operation. Eleanor's mind raced through the implications. Protective custody meant abandoning the pharmacy she'd fought so hard to establish. It meant disappearing from the community just as she was beginning to find her place. It meant disrupting Olivia's life yet again. How long? She asked, her voice tight. Impossible to say, Harper admitted. Weeks, possibly months if this becomes a formal witness protection situation. No. The word escaped before Eleanor had fully processed her own thoughts. There has to be another way. The next hour involved careful debriefing, with Margaret providing valuable information that actually strengthened the case against Chambers' operation. Her nephew had documented specific pharmaceutical anomalies with photographic evidence that could help establish patterns beyond what the underground facility had recorded. You've potentially placed yourself in danger by investigating this matter, Ramirez told Margaret gravely. We'll need to establish protection for both you and your nephew until the operation concludes. Margaret straightened her shoulders, her expression resolute. I've lived in Millfield Grove my entire life, Agent Ramirez. I'm not running away because some corporate vulture with a hidden agenda thinks she can intimidate us. Her words echoed Eleanor's own determination, and the two women exchanged a look of mutual respect that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. Besides, Margaret added with unexpected humor, who's going to supply medical equipment to the healthcare providers if I close up shop? Eleanor here has patients waiting. Ramirez recognized the same stubborn resilience he'd encountered with Eleanor and modified the protection plan accordingly. The community's business owners were clearly cut from stronger cloth than he'd initially assessed. By the following afternoon, preparations for the meeting with Chambers were complete. Eleanor would wear a concealed recording device. Agents would be positioned throughout the restaurant, and a tactical team would stand ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. As Eleanor prepared for the encounter that could either secure her future or destroy it entirely, she received a video call from Olivia, safe in a government facility outside town. Mom, are you sure about this? Her daughter asked, concern evident in her eyes. Agent Mitchell says it's really dangerous. I'm sure about what matters, Eleanor replied softly. Building our life here, standing up for what's right, showing you that we don't back down from challenges, even scary ones. Olivia's expression shifted from worry to pride. Dad always said you were the strongest person he ever knew. I didn't really understand what he meant until now. The reference to her husband, who had died serving his country far from home, surprised Eleanor. Your father said that? In his last video call before the deployment, Olivia confirmed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. He said he was proud to serve with people like him, but even prouder to be married to you. Said you fought your battles on the home front with more courage than anyone he knew. The revelation struck Eleanor deeply. She had always assumed her husband saw her practical nature as uninspiring compared to his military service. I don't do anything special, Olivia. I just face what comes, one day at a time. That's what makes you strong, Mom. Olivia's smile carried wisdom beyond her years. Now go catch some bad pharmaceutical executives so we can get back to helping patients and annoying the locals with our fancy digital systems. The conversation centered Eleanor, reminding her why she was taking this risk, not just for justice or to protect her business, but to demonstrate for Olivia that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. That evening, dressed in business attire that felt foreign after weeks in her pharmacy coat, Eleanor arrived at Millfield Grill, an upscale restaurant overlooking the town square. Chambers waited at a corner table, accompanied by two men in expensive suits whose alert postures suggested backgrounds in something other than pharmaceutical distribution. Ms. Winters, Chambers greeted her with her practiced smile. "So pleased you've reconsidered our offer. Allow me to introduce Michael Brennan and James Harrison, key investors in our Millfield Grove initiative." Eleanor shook their hands, noting the calculating assessment in their eyes. These were not ordinary business people. They carried the subtle tension of predators evaluating potential threats. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Before discussing specific terms, I wanted to understand more about your development plans and timeline. My decision impacts not just my business but my daughter's future." Brennan, the older of the two men, leaned forward. "Our vision for Millfield Grove is transformative. The traditional healthcare model has become inefficient and outdated. We're offering property owners the opportunity to benefit from inevitable modernization rather than resist it." "And if they continue to resist?" Eleanor asked directly. "Market forces and regulatory evolution will eventually force their hand." Harrison replied smoothly. "Those who partner with us early receive premium compensation. Those who delay find their options increasingly limited by changing healthcare regulations and reimbursement structures." The veiled threat was delivered with corporate politeness, but its meaning was unmistakable. "I understand you have particular interest in my property," Eleanor pressed, guiding the conversation toward the evidence Harper needed. "Is there something specific about its location that's valuable to your plans?" The three exchanged quick glances before Chambers responded. "Your corner location provides optimal access for our distribution model. The building configuration allows for the security systems we require for our specialized pharmaceutical handling." "Specialized pharmaceuticals?" Eleanor asked innocently. "I noticed Global Cure seems to be developing some unusual therapies. Are they one of your partners?" The temperature of the conversation dropped perceptibly. Brennan's expression hardened, while Harrison's hand moved slightly toward his jacket in a gesture that raised alarm bells in Eleanor's mind. "You've been researching our business interests," Brennan observed, his tone dangerously neutral. "Due diligence," Eleanor replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "When considering a major property transaction, it's important to understand who you're dealing with. And what exactly do you think you understand about our operations, Ms. Winters?" Harrison asked, his accent becoming more pronounced with tension. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Eleanor knew Harper and her team were listening, ready to intervene, but she needed to secure explicit evidence connecting these people to the bioweapon research. "I understand that Global Cure handles specialized therapeutic agents that require particular storage protocols," she said carefully. "Compounds that might attract unwanted attention without the right security infrastructure in place." Brennan's eyes narrowed. "You seem remarkably well informed for someone who only recently arrived in Millfield Grove." "The building I purchased came with interesting features," Eleanor replied, deliberately ambiguous. "Mr. Pearson apparently had connections I wasn't initially aware of." "The underground research facility," Harrison stated flatly, abandoning pretense. "We wondered if you had discovered it." The direct acknowledgement sent adrenaline coursing through Eleanor's system. They knew about the facility, had known all along, which meant Pearson's death and the suspiciously cheap sale of his property suddenly carried much darker implications. "Then you understand why your offer would need to be significantly higher than market value," Eleanor countered, playing for time while Harper's team processed this damning admission. "What I've found has considerable value to the right parties." Brennan leaned forward, dropping all pretense of legitimate business. "Ms. Winters, let me be perfectly clear. You have two options. Accept our very generous offer and walk away with your life intact, or suffer an unfortunate medication error that would leave your daughter an orphan. The choice is remarkably simple." The explicit threat was exactly what the operation needed, clearly recorded for prosecution. Eleanor felt a surge of triumph beneath her fear. They had what they needed. Actually, she replied with newfound confidence. "I think there's a third option you haven't considered." At her words, the restaurant erupted into coordinated action. Harper and her team converged on the table from multiple directions, weapons drawn, while uniformed FBI agents secured the exits. Brennan and Harrison reached for concealed weapons, but froze when confronted with overwhelming force. Federal agents. "Hands on the table now," Harper commanded. The look of shocked betrayal on Chambers' face as she was handcuffed provided Eleanor with a moment of pure satisfaction amidst the chaos. Her carefully constructed facade of legitimate business crumbled as agents recited the charges: conspiracy, bioterrorism research, extortion, and suspected involvement in Pearson's supposedly natural death. As the suspects were led away, Harper approached Eleanor, her professional demeanor softened by genuine respect. "You did well," she acknowledged. "Your testimony and the evidence from the underground facility should put them away for decades." "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, the adrenaline of the operation beginning to fade. Harper smiled slightly. "Now you go back to filling prescriptions and building the business you fought so hard to protect. Our team will complete the facility. Decommissioning within days, and your life returns to normal, or whatever passes for normal after an experience like this." The next morning, Eleanor stood in her pharmacy watching as Harper's team removed the last of their equipment from the now permanently sealed underground chamber. Olivia had returned home, already redesigning their health education materials to highlight the upcoming community wellness fair. The bell above the door chimed as Samuel and Amelia entered, followed by Margaret, Lisa, and several other business owners from the town center. "Heard the news about Chambers and her associates," Samuel said without preamble. "Arrested for some kind of bioterrorism operation. Guess that explains their aggressive acquisition strategy." Eleanor offered a carefully edited version of events, honoring her confidentiality agreements while acknowledging the community's role in standing firm against the corporate pressure. "The important thing is that the County Health Board has rejected MedMax's permit applications," Margaret added. "The town center stays community-focused, at least for now." "Which means we all have businesses to run," Lisa concluded practically. "Speaking of which, we've been talking, and we have a proposition for you." Amelia stepped forward. "The Millfield Grove Healthcare Coalition has been dormant for years, but with everything that's happened, we've decided to revive it. We'd like you to serve as its first chairperson." The offer stunned Eleanor. Just weeks ago, these same people had barely masked their skepticism about her chances of survival in their community. Now they were asking her to lead them. "Why me?" she asked. "Honestly, I'm still the newcomer here." "Because you showed us something important," Samuel explained. "Not just courage in standing up to corporate pressure, but vision in seeing possibilities where the rest of us saw only problems. The healthcare landscape is changing, and Millfield Grove needs that combination of determination and innovation. If we're going to thrive," Margaret nodded in agreement. "Besides, anyone who can turn a $400 investment into a successful pharmacy, while inadvertently helping break up an international bioterrorism ring, clearly has leadership qualities we could use." The room filled with laughter, breaking the tension and symbolizing the transformation that had occurred, not just in Eleanor's status within the community, but in the community itself. As they discussed plans for collaborative health initiatives and shared resources, Eleanor caught Olivia watching from behind the counter, a proud smile illuminating her face. In that moment, all the risks, fears, and challenges of the past weeks crystallized into something profoundly worthwhile. She had come to Millfield Grove seeking only a fresh start and a chance to build something meaningful for herself and her daughter. What she'd found instead was not just a business opportunity, but a community that, once they moved past their initial skepticism, valued determination and integrity above all. The underground chamber with its military secrets would remain sealed beneath her pharmacy, a reminder that beneath the ordinary surface of daily life often lie extraordinary depths. But the real discovery had been much simpler and far more valuable. The discovery that the greatest strength comes not from facing challenges alone, but from building connections that transform individual struggle into collective resilience. As the impromptu meeting evolved into a celebration of new beginnings, Eleanor realized that her $400 investment had purchased far more than a failing pharmacy. It had bought her a place to belong, a community to lead, and most importantly, the opportunity to show Olivia that with enough courage and determination, no obstacle, not even military bioweapon antidotes, hidden beneath your feet, could prevent you from creating the life you envisioned. 3 months after the dramatic arrest of Victoria Chambers and her co-conspirators, Winters' family pharmacy hummed with productive energy. The once neglected building now stood as a beacon of community healthcare, its fresh blue and white exterior matching the crisp autumn sky. Inside, patients moved between consultation stations where staff provided personalized medication reviews and health education. Eleanor stood at the newly expanded dispensing counter, carefully checking the complex prescription for an elderly patient. Her practiced movements reflected both her growing pharmaceutical expertise and her unwavering commitment to precision. The past months had transformed her from a tentative newcomer to a respected healthcare provider, a metamorphosis born of necessity, determination, and the crucible of extraordinary circumstances. "Mrs. Winters," called a familiar voice, pulling her from her concentration. Eleanor looked up to see Agent Harper standing in the pharmacy entrance, dressed in civilian clothes but still carrying herself with the unmistakable alertness of someone who assessed every room before entering it. "Agent Harper," Eleanor smiled, handing the completed prescription to her technician before approaching. "This is a pleasant surprise. What brings you to Millfield Grove?" "Closure," Harper replied, her typically formal demeanor softening slightly. "And a personal courtesy. I thought you'd want to know directly rather than reading it in the news." The federal grand jury returned indictments this morning against Chambers, Brennan, and Harrison on all counts: conspiracy, bioterrorism research, attempted murder, corporate fraud. Eleanor felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. The danger that had lurked beneath her pharmacy, both literally and figuratively, was finally being addressed through proper channels of justice. "The evidence from the underground facility was definitive," Harper continued. "Combined with your recorded conversation and testimony from their other targeted properties, the prosecutor is confident they'll face decades in federal prison." "What about Global Cure and their research?" Eleanor asked, lowering her voice, though the pharmacy was relatively empty at this hour. "Dismantled," Harper confirmed with satisfaction. "The CDC and international health organizations are analyzing the countermeasures to ensure they're properly preserved. The pathogens themselves were thankfully still theoretical designs and simulations rather than actual synthesized agents. But their specificity was disturbing." Eleanor shuddered, remembering the technical documentation she had glimpsed. "And Pearson? Did you ever determine his exact involvement?" Harper's expression turned solemn. "Based on financial records and testimony from former associates, we believe Pearson was initially an unwitting custodian, as we suspected. But approximately 5 years ago, he discovered what was hidden beneath his pharmacy. Rather than reporting it, he attempted to leverage his knowledge for increased payments. And they eliminated him," Eleanor concluded, the pieces finally fitting together. "His health was already compromised, making it easy to disguise. A slightly altered medication, a small increase in dosage. The medical examiner is reviewing the case now, but we may never prove it conclusively. The calculated coldness of such an action killing a man through his own medications reinforced just how dangerous the people behind Medmax had been." Eleanor felt a renewed gratitude for the protection that had surrounded her and Olivia during the investigation. "His children never knew," Harper added. They were genuinely desperate to unload the property after his death. The $400 purchase price wasn't suspicious to them because they had no idea of the facility's existence or value. Eleanor nodded, remembering the hastily signed paperwork and the relief on the faces of Pearson's adult children as they handed over the keys. They just wanted to move on. Speaking of moving on, Harper said, glancing around the thriving pharmacy, you've clearly done well since our operation concluded. The place looks completely different. Pride bloomed in Eleanor's chest as she followed Harper's gaze. The transformation went far beyond cosmetic improvements. Each change represented hours of planning, community collaboration, and relentless pursuit of her vision for accessible healthcare. The Small Business Administration loan came through after the investigation cleared, Eleanor explained. And once we formed the Healthcare Coalition, we were able to negotiate better terms with suppliers and insurance networks as a group rather than individual practices. Smart strategy, Harper observed. The strength of community rather than isolated competition. Exactly. Samuel and Amelia share their patient education resources. Lisa from the Wellness Center conducts nutrition classes in our consultation room, and we provide medication management support for all their patients. It's a collaborative model rather than competitive. As they spoke, the pharmacy door chimed, and Olivia entered with Noah Taylor, both carrying armfuls of promotional materials for the upcoming health fair. Olivia's face lit up when she spotted Harper. Agent Harper, she called, hastily depositing her load on the counter before rushing over. Did you tell Mom about the indictments? We saw it on the news alert. Harper smiled, a genuine expression that softened the professional facade she typically maintained. I just shared the update. Your mother's testimony was instrumental in securing those charges. Olivia beamed with pride, glancing at Eleanor with undisguised admiration. That's my mom, taking down bioterrorists while building the best pharmacy in 3 counties. The casual confidence in her daughter's voice touched Eleanor deeply. The frightened teenager who had reluctantly moved to this small town just months ago had blossomed into a poised young woman with purpose and pride in their shared accomplishment. The health fair preparations are coming along nicely, Olivia reported, switching to business mode. We've got 26 healthcare providers participating, free screenings for diabetes and hypertension, and the governor's office confirmed they're sending a representative to discuss the Rural Healthcare Initiative. Harper raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Governor's office? You've developed some significant connections. The Millfield model is gaining attention, Eleanor explained with modest pride. Our approach to collaborative rural healthcare delivery is showing promising results in patient outcomes and cost management. The state health department is considering it as a template for other underserved communities. Noah, who had been organizing the promotional materials, joined the conversation. Mrs. Winters has revolutionized healthcare access here, he said with the enthusiasm of youth. My grandmother used to drive 2 hours each way for her specialist appointments. Now the specialists come to the monthly clinic days, and Mrs. Winters coordinates all their medication protocols. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at the praise. It's a team effort, she demurred. And speaking of teams, Noah has been accepted to pharmacy school for next fall. He'll be returning to Millfield after graduation as part of our rural healthcare development program. Harper studied Eleanor with newfound respect. When we first met, you were fighting to keep your business alive. Now you're implementing systemic healthcare reform and developing the next generation of providers. That's quite an evolution in 3 months. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Eleanor replied. After everything that happened, it became clear that isolated, competitive healthcare models were failing our community. We needed a different approach. Before Harper could respond, Margaret Williams bustled through the door, her arms laden with medical supplies. Unlike her first visits to the pharmacy, when skepticism had sharpened her every word, Today she moved with the comfortable familiarity of a frequent collaborator. "Eleanor, the glucometers for the health fair just arrived," she announced, then noticed Harper. "Agent Harper, good to see you again. Are you here about the verdicts?" As Margaret joined their conversation, Samuel and Amelia Chun arrived with additional supplies for the health fair booth they would share with Eleanor's pharmacy. Within minutes, the small gathering had expanded to include Lisa Patel and James Donovan, each contributing updates on their portion of the collaborative event. Harper watched with fascination as the once fragmented, suspicious business owners coordinated their efforts with practiced efficiency. The transformation wasn't just in Eleanor's pharmacy, but in the entire community's approach to working together. "I should let you get back to your preparations," Harper said after observing for several minutes. "I just wanted to deliver the news personally and see how you were doing." "I appreciate that," Eleanor replied sincerely. "Would you like a tour before you go? The facility decommissioning is complete, but I think you'll find what we've done with the space interesting." Harper nodded, and Eleanor led her through the transformed pharmacy. The former storeroom where they had discovered the underground facility had been converted into an education center with digital health stations and a telemedicine suite. The dispensing area now featured advanced technology that allowed for greater accuracy and efficiency. The consultation rooms provided privacy for in-depth medication therapy management. "Impressive," Harper commented as they completed the circuit. "You've created something remarkable here." "From necessity," Eleanor acknowledged, "but also from possibility. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what might be built from the ruins." They paused at the spot where the entrance to the underground facility had been permanently sealed and disguised beneath new flooring. Nothing remained visible of the secret that had once threatened everything Eleanor was building. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't discovered that facility?" Harper asked quietly. "If you had simply continued operating without knowing what was beneath your feet?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. But I've learned that most of life is like that. We build on foundations we didn't create, sometimes without knowing what lies beneath. The question isn't whether there are hidden challenges, but how we respond when they're revealed." Harper nodded thoughtfully. "Most people would have run when given the option of protective custody. You chose to stand your ground and fight." "I had something worth fighting for," Eleanor replied simply. "Not just the business, but the future it represented for Olivia and me. The chance to put down roots, to belong somewhere." As they returned to the front of the pharmacy, Eleanor found her team had expanded their health fair planning session to include representatives from the local school and senior center. Ideas flowed freely, each person building on others' suggestions with enthusiasm and purpose. "Your daughter mentioned the Millfield model," Harper said, observing the collaborative energy. "But it seems to me this is really the Eleanor model, bringing people together to create something stronger than they could build alone." Eleanor shook her head, genuinely uncomfortable with the attribution. "I just created a space where cooperation could happen. The community did the rest." "Don't underestimate your impact," Harper insisted. "Not everyone can envision possibilities beyond traditional boundaries. That's a rare gift." After Harper departed, Eleanor rejoined the planning session seamlessly, integrating into the community she had once viewed from the outside. As they finalized the health fair schedule, she caught Olivia watching her with a knowing smile. "What?" Eleanor asked during a brief lull in the conversation. "Nothing," Olivia replied, her eyes twinkling. "Just thinking about how far we've come since you dragged me to that business meeting 3 months ago." Eleanor glanced around at the faces surrounding them, people who had begun as skeptics and evolved into partners, colleagues who had become friends. "We've all come a long way." Later that evening, after the pharmacy closed and the last of their collaborators had departed, Eleanor and Olivia sat in the consultation room reviewing the day's accomplishments. The golden light of sunset streamed through the windows, casting the space in a warm glow that matched Eleanor's sense of contentment. "I got my college application essay finished," Olivia mentioned casually, though her slightly nervous tone betrayed the statement's importance. "That's wonderful," Eleanor replied. "What topic did you finally decide on?" Olivia hesitated briefly. "I wrote about moving here and starting over. About watching you face impossible challenges and build something meaningful anyway." Emotion welled in Eleanor's throat. "You wrote about me?" "About us," Olivia corrected gently. "About how courage isn't fearlessness, it's moving forward despite fear. How community isn't something you find, but something you create through persistent connection." The mature insight from her once reluctant teenager left Eleanor momentarily speechless. The journey that had begun with a desperate $400 investment in a failing pharmacy had yielded dividends far beyond business success. "The admissions counselor who reviewed my draft said it was one of the most compelling essays she'd read," Olivia continued, a hint of pride coloring her voice. "She said it showed unusual depth of understanding about resilience and community building." "She's right," Eleanor managed, blinking back unexpected tears. "You do understand those things deeply." "Because I learned from the best," Olivia replied simply. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. Glancing at the screen, she saw a text from Samuel. "Just heard from the state health commissioner. They've approved our integrated care proposal. Full funding. For the rural healthcare initiative, we did it." Eleanor showed the message to Olivia, whose eyes widened with excitement. "Mom, do you know what this means? The entire Millfield model will be implemented across the state. Your vision is going statewide." The magnitude of the news took a moment to register. What had begun as a desperate attempt to salvage her modest business investment had evolved into an innovative healthcare delivery system that would now extend far beyond Millfield Grove. "Not my vision," Eleanor corrected gently. "Our collective vision. Everyone contributed essential elements." "But it started with you," Olivia insisted. "With your willingness to try something different when the traditional approach wasn't working." As they locked up the pharmacy and headed home, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. From the moment she had discovered the hidden facility beneath her newly purchased pharmacy, events had unfolded with breathtaking speed and intensity. The danger had been real, the stakes impossibly high, the outcomes far from certain. Yet through it all, she had held fast to a simple truth. Forward was the only direction worth moving. Each obstacle had presented not just a challenge, but an opportunity to reimagine possibilities. Each setback had forced creative solutions that ultimately strengthened their position. The following morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the health fair that would occupy the town square. Eleanor arrived early to help with the final preparations, watching with satisfaction as colorful tents and information booths transformed the space into a celebration of community wellness. Samuel approached as she reviewed the schedule of events. His normally serious expression relaxed into genuine happiness. "Can you believe this?" he asked, gesturing to the bustling square. 3 months ago, we were all struggling independently against corporate takeover. Now we're implementing a statewide healthcare model. It's remarkable what becomes possible when people work together, Eleanor agreed. That's the real success story here, Samuel observed. Not just the business growth or program funding, but the fundamental shift in how we approach challenges. That's your legacy, Eleanor. Before she could deflect the praise, Margaret and Lisa joined them, followed by James and other community leaders. Each brought updates, questions, and enthusiastic ideas for expanding their collaborative efforts. The energy was infectious, the collective commitment palpable. As the health fair officially opened and residents began flowing into the square, Eleanor stepped back to observe the transformation around her. Children lined up for vision screenings at one booth, while seniors received medication reviews at another. Community health workers demonstrated proper techniques for managing chronic conditions, and nutrition experts offered practical cooking demonstrations. In every direction, she saw evidence of what could be accomplished when people united around a common purpose. The competitive isolation that had once defined Millfield Grove's healthcare landscape had given way to a vibrant ecosystem of integrated services. Mrs. Winters? A woman's hesitant voice drew Eleanor's attention. She turned to find an elderly resident she recognized as one of Samuel's patients. "Yes, Mrs. Jenkins, how can I help you?" "I just wanted to thank you," the woman sighed, her weathered hands clutching a medication organizer emblazoned with the Winters Family Pharmacy logo. "Before you came, I was taking 12 different pills from 3 different doctors, and nobody seemed to know what the others were prescribing. Now everything's coordinated, and I'm down to just 5 medications. I can afford them all, and for the first time in years, I actually understand what each one does." The simple testimonial touched Eleanor deeply. Behind all the programs, initiatives, and systemic changes, this was the true measure of success: individual lives improved through accessible, coordinated care. "You're very welcome, Mrs. Jenkins. That's exactly why we're here." As the woman moved on to explore other health fair booths, Olivia appeared at Eleanor's side, accompanied by a professional-looking woman in a tailored suit. "Mom, this is Catherine Reynolds from the governor's office. She'd like to discuss expanding the Millfield model to other counties." Eleanor greeted the representative warmly, answering her questions about implementation challenges and success metrics. As their conversation progressed, Catherine's initial professional interest evolved into genuine enthusiasm. "This is exactly the kind of innovative, ground-up solution the governor has been seeking," she explained. "Healthcare delivery that's responsive to local needs while providing scalable, sustainable frameworks. Would you be willing to consult on the statewide implementation?" The question caught Eleanor by surprise. "Me? I'm just a pharmacy owner with an education background." Catherine smiled knowingly. "You're the architect of a healthcare delivery revolution that's showing measurable improvements in patient outcomes, provider satisfaction, and cost management. Your background in education actually makes you ideally suited to help other communities implement similar models." Olivia squeezed her mother's arm encouragingly. "Say yes, Mom. This is what you're meant to do." Looking around at the thriving health fair, the physical manifestation of what could be created from vision and perseverance, Eleanor felt a surge of certainty. The journey that had begun with a desperate $400 investment had led her to this moment of unexpected opportunity and profound purpose. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd be honored to help." As the day progressed, Eleanor moved through the health fair, connecting with community members, answering questions, and witnessing the impact of their collective efforts. The transformation extended far beyond the physical changes to her pharmacy, or even the improved healthcare services. It resided in the renewed spirit of the community itself, recognition that together they could create solutions that had seemed impossible in isolation. Late that afternoon, as the event began winding down, Eleanor found a quiet moment to slip away from the activity. She walked the short distance to her pharmacy, unlocking the door and stepping into the peaceful interior. Moving to the spot where the entrance to the underground facility had been, she stood silently, acknowledging the remarkable chain of events that had unfolded from that discovery. The military bioweapon Antidotes hidden beneath her pharmacy had presented an existential threat not just to her business, but potentially to global health security. Yet that same discovery had catalyzed connections, innovations, and transformations that would now benefit countless individuals. "Mom?" Olivia's voice called softly from the doorway. "Everyone's gathering for the closing ceremony. They want you to speak." Eleanor turned to her daughter, struck by the confident young woman who had emerged from this journey. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out if we hadn't found that hidden door, or if we had just sold to Medmax? When things got dangerous, Olivia considered the question thoughtfully. Sometimes. But then I remember something you told me when Dad died and we had to start over the first time. What's that? You said that life's hardest moments often lead to our greatest growth, but only if we're brave enough to keep moving forward through the uncertainty. Olivia's eyes shone with emotion and wisdom beyond her years. That's what you did here. Mom, you kept moving forward, even when forward led straight into danger. You showed me what courage really looks like. Eleanor embraced her daughter, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey they had shared. We showed each other. Together, they returned to the town square where the community had gathered for the closing ceremony. As Eleanor took her place at the podium, she gazed out at the faces before her once strangers, now partners in an enterprise far greater than any individual business. 3 months ago, she began, her voice steady with conviction, I stood in this town as an outsider with nothing but a $400 investment and a desperate hope for a fresh start. What I found beneath that investment, both literally and figuratively challenged everything I thought I knew about business, community, and myself. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd, those familiar with the full story, appreciating the multiple layers of her reference. But here's what I've learned from our journey together. The most valuable discoveries aren't found in hidden chambers or secret formulas. They're found in the connections we forge when facing common challenges. They're found in the innovation that emerges when diverse perspectives unite around shared purpose. She paused, making eye contact with Samuel and Amelia, with Margaret, with Lisa and James, with each person who had contributed to their collective transformation. The Millfield model isn't remarkable because it's perfect. It's remarkable because it's adaptive, collaborative, and fundamentally human. It recognizes that healthcare isn't just about medications or treatments. It's about creating systems that honor individual needs while harnessing collective strengths. As the golden afternoon light bathed the gathering, Eleanor felt a profound sense of homecoming, not to a place, but to a purpose. The widow who had arrived with nothing but determination and a meager investment had found something far more valuable than financial security. She had discovered her unique capacity to bridge divides, envision possibilities, and catalyze transformation. Our journey is just beginning, she concluded, her gaze finding Olivia in the crowd. But we move forward together, knowing that whatever challenges await, we have already proven our capacity to transform obstacles into opportunities. That is the true legacy of Millfield Grove, not just what we've built, but how we've built it. Together, the applause that followed reflected more than approval for her words. It celebrated the spirit of possibility that now defined their community, a spirit that had emerged from the most unexpected beginning. A bankrupt widow purchasing a closed pharmacy for $400, never imagining that beneath its worn floors lay not just military bioweapon antidotes, but the catalyst for her most meaningful life's work. As Eleanor stepped away from the podium, surrounded by the community that had become her home, she embraced the beautiful truth that had emerged from their extraordinary journey. Sometimes life's most powerful transformations begin with the courage to invest in possibilities others cannot yet see. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.